What's going on, everybody? My name is TAETRO, coming to you from a half-built new home studio. Today I want to talk to you about something people ask me a lot about, which is this audio effect rack that I use on pretty much every single one of my tracks, called Basic Audio Processing. This is an audio effect rack I created myself in Ableton Live, and it has basically become a utility tool for me in any kind of music that I'm making. Actually, so much so that when I create a new audio track, Command T, it automatically loads. When I create a new MIDI track, it automatically loads. So today I'm going to show you all the components of the basic audio processing rack, and I'm also going to show you how to make your own custom audio effect rack so you can either recreate this one or create some of your own. Today's video is going to be sponsored by Skillshare, but we'll talk about that later. For now, let me show you what the basic audio processing rack actually does. So the rack is essentially made of 3 different audio effects, and these are audio effects that I found myself using on most, if not all, tracks. It contains an EQ8, a reverb, and a compressor. And if you notice, these are all Ableton stock plugins, so you can probably really easily recreate this in Ableton on your own, or swap these out for your favorite EQ, your favorite reverb, and your favorite compressor. But it's not just about the effects in the rack that make this useful, it's about how we use these 8 knobs here, which are called macro knobs. That's what makes this device so convenient for me on my mixes and on my different tracks. So the way it works is every audio effect rack comes with 8 different knobs, and you can map different parameters of the effects enclosed in that audio effect rack to those macros. It's very similar to mapping a MIDI controller, but we're doing everything all in software. So let me show you the 8 controls that I have mapped to the macros that are essentially the main controls I utilize from each one of these audio effects. So the first 2 macro knobs here are linked to the compressor. And we have one that controls the compression threshold and one that controls the output gain. So I found that these were the controls I was using the most on the compressor. Output gain mainly in case the compressor adds a little too much gain, or if I need to kind of cheat and boost the gain on the track a little bit, I can do it here. And then the compression threshold, obviously. So if we take this synth track, for instance, I can adjust the threshold, which will change the quality of the sound. I can also mess with the output gain in case the compressor has added too much gain or I need to boost it a little. And you can see that within the rack, the parameters that are being adjusted actually have this little green marker on them. So same for threshold, same for output gain. By default, my output gain is set to 0, and my threshold is generally set to -28. This is at 28.6. That's not quite precise, but that gets adjusted based on the type of track that I have. So you notice we have low boost, low cut, high boost, high cut. And like I said, those are adjusting the EQ8. So basically I have band 1 and band 8. Those are the bands that are basically being adjusted here. So obviously my low boost is used to boost that first band of the EQ, as you can see there. This is helpful if I need to add a little bass boost onto something, but it's also helpful if I need to take away or lower the bass. You might be saying, oh, isn't that what the low cut is for? Not quite, because what the low cut does is actually sweeps it like that. So that's really handy for tracks that actually don't need any bass content, which are most tracks that aren't a bass or a kick or something like that. I can just sweep out all of those frequencies that I don't need. And then if I did want to add some attenuation here, I could go ahead and boost that, because I know that this knob boosts band 1 no matter where it is. So that's really helpful. And the high boost and high cut essentially do the same thing. So high boost, bringing up band 4. High cut, sweeping down on band 8. So this is good if I want to add some brightness here or take a little bit away. and then if I want to sweep out any high frequencies that I might not need. Again, notice that we have little green markers here that tell us what is being controlled by the macro knobs. And those change depending on what band you have selected. So for band 1, that's the low boost and low cut. We can boost and we can sweep. The final 2 knobs adjust the reverb. You all know that I love reverb, and I add it to many tracks. By default on this rack, it actually comes off. So the dry wet is at 0 and the room size is at very low value, 200 milliseconds. But if I go ahead and open this up, you can see that it's simply adjusting the dry wet is the dry wet, of course, right here, marked by a green marker. And the room size changes the decay time. So I call it room size because that's kind of how the effect sounds. As you add time to that, the longer the reverb. So I feel like the room is getting bigger. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that. So those 2 main knobs, the dry wet and the room size, basically get me where I need to go on the reverb. And it is worth saying that within these 3 effects, I do have these 8 macro knobs, which I just demonstrated for you. Those are the main controls that I use in day-to-day beat making. But that's not to say that I'm not diving into these different effects and changing things within the effect specifically to something that, that's not mapped on a macro. For instance, one thing I do a lot with the EQ is kind of switch this to a sharper curve here. That way it's a much straighter line and I get a much cleaner sweep. I actually probably in the future will switch that to be on by default. Also things like what kind of EQ is here on the reverb. It's usually by default got a high cut. Sometimes I swap that out depending on what quality I want from the reverb. And then also to say that the order changes. So right now in my chain, I have EQ, reverb, and compression, which works for most things, but say I want the reverb to float above that compression. I don't want the reverb to be compressed. I might swap the order of these 2 audio effects. And also you might be saying, well, you can't just use the same compressor across all devices, especially with drums and instruments. Well, I actually have on my drum rack, I have a basic audio processing rack that is strictly meant for drums. And the only change that I'm using here is my attack is up at 40 milliseconds, so I don't lose the attack of the drum hits. Meanwhile, on the normal basic audio processing rig that I use for every other track that's not drums, the attack is much lower at 2 milliseconds. So I make adjustments within there, but this is the basic starter kit for the basic audio processing rack. And of course, you can make your own basic audio processing rack in Ableton really easy. And I'm going to show you how to do that after I tell you about today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey. There are thousands of inspiring classes for creatives in photography, video, music production, and more. The classes include a combination of video lessons and class projects. The first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description down below get a 2-month free trial of premium membership so you can explore your creativity. With your membership, you get access to all the classes on Skillshare with hands-on projects and feedback from an interactive community. One class that I know a lot of us can take value in is the Learn How to Mix Your Music class taught by Young Guru. If you've got a lot of projects that need some mixing, maybe it's time to take this class and bring your mixes to the next level. One of the best things about this class is that it's 7 lessons long and just under an hour, so you can make this fit into pretty much any schedule. So if you're unsure what's next, if you're kind of stuck at home and looking for some structure, a creative challenge like one of these classes to help bring your music production skills to the next level can actually help you accomplish some small goals and give you a feeling of fulfillment and accomplishment. So be one of the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description down below and get your 2 free month premium membership of Skillshare today. Back to basic audio processing. All right, so like I said, making your own audio effect rack is really, really easy. All you have to do is open up a blank track. So I have a blank audio track here, but you can work in MIDI or audio. And then go to Audio Effects and find Audio Effect Rack. Now these are just empty audio effect racks that you can drag in, and you notice that it says Drop Audio Effects here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and recreate the one that I just demonstrated for you. So what I would do is add in my 3 effects, so my compressor, my EQ, and my reverb. And let's put them in the correct order. So I'll put my EQ first and my compressor last. And then you make your adjustments to taste, right? So I usually have my ratio on my compressor up at 3:1. I bring my threshold down to about 28. I put my reverb in high quality mode. I go ahead and switch this here so I can get a nice sweep. And I go ahead and add an 8th band so I can have that high cut. But you're noticing that there's no knobs here. Well, we need to turn on the macro knob button here. And none of these knobs are mapped yet. So again, like I said earlier, very similar to how we map MIDI controllers. All I have to do is press map. And now instead of a blue, which I usually get for hardware mapping, we get a green overlay. So if we start with the compressor like we did with the last one, I can go ahead and click on threshold and click map. And now that control is mapped to macro 1. I can go ahead and add the output gain to macro 2. So it's as simple as clicking on the parameter you want on the knob and then clicking map on the knob. Notice that we get minimum and maximum values in the macro mappings menu over here on the side. That means I can essentially set a maximum and a minimum to how far this knob can go. So to just demonstrate that, let's say I wanted my minimum threshold to be minus 38. I'm just making these numbers up. In my maximum, I don't want to push it too far. My maximum will be 0. So now if I go out of this mapping menu by clicking map again, my threshold, the bottom of that knob is minus 38 like we set it, and the top of the knob is 0. So I've set that minimum and maximum, and you can do that to taste, of course. Let's go back into the mapping menu. Let's go ahead and map our low cut here, which means I can click on band 1 and then frequency, and then go ahead and map that. We can test it right here to make sure it's doing what we want it to do. Now we can go ahead and adjust the Q. There we go. That's going to allow us to do that little boost. So let's go ahead and assign macro 5 to be the gain of band 4. That gives us that little shelf. And then to do the high cut, I'm actually going to map band 8's frequency. Finally, let's go ahead and add our reverb mappings. So we're only going to map decay time and dry wet. So our decay time, let's go ahead and map to macro 7. And then our dry wet will map to macro 8. Remember that you can set minimum and maximum values here to your liking. I'm going to get out of this mapping menu now because we have all 8 mapped, but they don't look as neat and tidy as the basic audio processing rack that I showed you before. So I've color coded mine. I've also renamed a couple things. So as you can see, threshold and output gain. I went ahead and renamed these, one just a compression threshold and the other one output gain. I actually kept it the same. That's an adjustment that you can make, and you can make those adjustments by clicking on the macro title here, holding Command R or Control R on Windows, and typing in the title you would like to give it. And then by right-clicking on those macros, you can go ahead and change the color. I just find it an easier visual to go ahead and color code these different macros. We save this rack. There's one of 2 ways you can save the rack. I can either just rename this. I'm just going to call this demo rack. And what I can do is in my user library, I can just click and drag this, and demo rack will be saved. We can go ahead and drop it into any project now. You can also click the little save icon, which will do the same thing. Make sure you've dialed in all your minimums and maximums and set all these defaults to the values you want, because that's how it will load every single time. So you want it to load on a clean start, like my basic audio processing rack does. This is a fresh start for me. So of course the basic audio processing rack is a utility for me. It's something that I use on each different track, and it's more of a tool than an effect. But you could go ahead and get crazy and create your own audio effects racks with all different kinds of effects, as many effects as you can fit in the rack, and really have a lot of fun with it. So I hope that was easy to follow. Let me know in the comments if you are creating your own basic audio processing rack, or any type of audio effect rack for that matter. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and don't forget to check out the link down below to sign up for 2 free months of Skillshare. Hope to bring you more videos from the new home studio, but for now, this has been TAETRO. Have a good one.